I don't know if any of you know a lad by the name of Fred Davidson, but Fred made a lot of presentation in his life. He's got a drilling company. And he was telling me about one such case here a while back where he went into a room to give a presentation. And he walked in, there was 3 people in it. He walked to the front of the room and he started his presentation, woke one of them up, and that guy left. So you folks are great to be here to listen to the very last speaker of the day. I was kind of concerned that there might be only 3 or 4 of us here, so I'm really gratified that you hung around. I have an interesting story for you. Not a lot of facts and figures, but a good story. And it starts up in Scotland with the discovery of a little project called Conanish. And then a lad by the name of Richard Conroy, who was in Ireland. He was a statesman in Ireland and a mining guy. He had the idea, well, Conanish is in Scotland, in the Dalradian rocks. There's a big fault there. That fault comes through Ireland, so there should be a spot to look for gold in Ireland. And he started the search for gold in Ireland only 30 years ago, as compared to Canada, which goes back a century and a half. So from the back of Richard's observation that these rocks could potentially produce gold, we've now seen the evolution of one great gold deposit there. It's called Curragno, and it's owned by Dalradian. And Dalradian has had a long history now for the last, say, roughly 8 years. They're in the feasibility stage. They're well financed. They're pushing ahead with it. And we fully expect it to be one of the world's highest grade operating mines here in the next, let's say, in the next 5 years, depending on how quickly they get it into production. So from this dream of there possibly being gold in Ireland to the fact that there's now a 5 to 6 million ounce deposit on the way to production is a really big deal in opening up the possibilities for a new terrain. Well, this deposit spawned some inspiration into 2 guys, one named Rick Parker, the other Andy Bowden. Now, Andy has spent his life in Ireland, mainly in the zinc end of things. He was responsible for the discovery of the R zone at the Galmoy mine. It's one of their biggest ones. So he's rooted in Ireland. Rick has been international. His experience spreads the globe. They got together at Curragno and say, well, where else in Ireland might we find a similar environment? And it turns out the Ox Mountains. Well, why just simply the Ox Mountains? Well, what happens, these old rocks that have been laid down are mainly covered with younger rocks in Ireland. So you don't see the old rocks very often. You see them at Curragno, you see them at Cabanacaw, and then you see them in one other spot called the Ox Mountains. And the Ox Mountains are one of these areas where the old rocks poke up through the younger Carboniferous, and they happen to be adjacent to a big fault that is common to the development of both the Conanish and the Curragno deposits. The fault continues down through the Republic of Ireland and out into the Atlantic Ocean. But splays off this fault are the source of where we're finding the gold. That's where they're found it at Cabanacaw. That's where they're finding it at Curragno. And at Ox Mountains, we have 2 areas, one called Clunacool, and one called Cabra. And you'll notice that Conanish, Curragno, Cabanacaw, Clunacool, Cabra all start with C. So we think we've got a really good indicator there that we're onto something. Now, starting from that dream, Rick and Andy went out and staked something like 1,600 square kilometers by way of prospecting license. They prospected for a couple of years, and the way they did that in Ireland, it was to look at the rock fences in the fields and along the roads. What happens, these pieces of float in the fields are interrupting the farmer's farming, so he puts them on the side and he eventually builds a fence with them. And it's easy for a geologist to go around and get a rough idea of what he might be looking at in terms of underlying geology. And to this end, they eventually came across 2 areas of interest, the Clunacool and the Cabra. At Clunacool, the first indication, besides some good-looking rocks in the fences, the first indication they found up a creek bed. It was a 9.8 gram rock that looked good, and that was the first real indication of gold in that part of the world. So from that humble beginning of that one rock. There was no geochem, there was no anything else, just that one rock started them searching closer in that area. And they eventually came up with a nice, about a kilometer and a half by half a kilometer area where there was some float. Some float ran up to 17 grams. And then they thought, well, this is an area to look at, but was it moved by glaciers? Who knew? They speculated that there might have been a structure in the area. Well, a couple of years after they got going, TELUS survey demonstrated that there in fact is a structure. The TELUS survey was between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland as a geophysical survey, and lo and behold, there's a 4.5 kilometer long structure that shows up geophysically. We didn't know anything about it, but we speculated that that float came from that structure. So in 2016, we drilled some holes. We started out not knowing really what we were going to be looking at, but what we found was a system where we now know off the main fault that we're drilling at Clunical, there's some more splays, and those splays indicate that there's some veining coming off of that main fault. When we did our drilling, we drilled 9 holes that we call one fence. One fence a hole across the structure. The structure we now know is 150 to 200 meters wide. We know that there's gold in it because we had gold over 1 gram in all 9 holes. We know that there's some that went over 3 grams and as high as 7.5 grams in the drilling. We had up to 17 grams in the float. So we now know that, okay, there's gold in the system. In the middle of the system, there's a graphitic zone. So we know that the geophysics is tracking that graphitic zone. So we now know there's a structure, okay? And we can see it's 4.5 kilometers long. The big fault running down. And the area that we're interested in right here in the Ox Mountains, there's your structure. It's 4.5 kilometers long. The area, the big red, is where the float is. The area, the yellow circle, is where we did our drilling. So now we know that the structure, okay, nobody knows what this structure is. There's no outward expression of what that structure is on the ground. There's very, very little evidence of its existence, and it was very hard to find. Newmont was here in the 1980s. He didn't find any indication of gold at all. So this is something really special. So what we don't know is what's in that structure. There's no one on the planet that can tell you, is that going to be a bunch of moose pasture, or is it going to be another Kirkland Lake, another Red Lake, another Timmins structure? No one knows at this stage of the game. Now, at the beginning of this presentation, the words were, you want to concentrate on exploration. Well, this is exploration in its truest sense of the word. And this is discovery. We have discovered a structure that's gold-bearing in a part of the world that no one knows anything about. And is it worth taking a shot? Well, I'd say probably. We've got a $3 million market cap. We got the money in the kitty. We just raised $500,000. We're getting ready to go drilling, and we're going to start drilling in June. So that's a worthwhile, shot. If you're going to play an exploration play, starting, and the stock's in 6, 7 cents, 5 cents. So this is what we're going to do. The first phase of drilling was over here. So we're going to cover this area here. We're going to start with 3 holes. We're going to be drilling roughly 550, 575 meter holes, testing the structure along strike and at depth. So that is all good, but I don't have a lot of time left, but if you can just keep that in your mind, that is worthwhile because we're going to be drilling. So I had a little surprise for you. I got 48 seconds to tell you. It's tungsten. Now, everybody knows that you don't want to talk about another property when you got a good property in your kitty. But I have to tell you, we've had this for 15 years. We did not invent it, okay? We didn't go looking for it, we've had it for a long time. It's got a PEA, it's real, it's got a 2 kilometer long adit in it at shoreline. Now, why am I excited about it again now? I didn't do this on purpose, but the price of tungsten has come up 79% since January of 2017. So it's this rise in the price of tungsten that is making us interested about the possibility of a renewed interest in the tungsten. And Playfair did run in the past on the basis of tungsten. So gang, this is where the tungsten is, and for sure there's a deposit on that hill, and there's a PEA on our website that you can go look at, and it's getting really close to the point where it could be mined. And here, okay, the hills in Ireland, where who knows what glory may behold us all. And I thank you very much for listening and look forward to hopefully coming back with a win.